The Savage Axis project rifle is continuing to improve. We've added some new glass in that last 600-yard match, which definitely made things a lot easier for me, and it did boost the scores up a little bit. We did have the one issue with getting some sticky bolt with one of the loads that I had worked up, so I've gone back, I've fixed that. Everything is using the same brass, same load, so now everything should run really well no matter what the temperature is in the next match. And that's just in 3 days we have the next 1,000-yard match. Be sure to subscribe to the Social Regressive so that you can get updates when the new videos come out. And we also have the playlist over here if you want to catch everything that's happened up to this point. The next thing that I want to do to improve the comfort and the handling of the rifle, because really mechanically it's working out really well. It's precise, the loads are good, trigger is decent from where we started with. Optic, of course, is good, but what I want to do here is do something about this comb. In the last match, I had kind of a fakey cheek riser, and what I want to do is actually take a chunk of Kydex and come up with something that's going to be a bit more permanent, it's going to be prettier, and a bit more solid. The thing that I had was just kind of floating around. It really didn't work out all that well. So we're going to do something good. And normally what folks do when they make a Kydex cheek riser, and you can actually get some of these kits from Amazon and other places, is they'll take this, the piece of Kydex, they'll fold it over, and then they'll drill a couple of holes, put slots in the Kydex, and then you can adjust it up and down. Now what I want to do is make something that's non-destructive, because I do have kind of a long-term plan of making a very permanent cheek riser on here, an adjustable one, where I'm going to actually be chopping off the top of the comb here and then putting in, some good hardware so that we can get an adjustable cheek piece using this original piece of wood. That one's very destructive, but if I drill holes in this thing, I can't really do that. So what I want is something non-destructive, something that's not going to mess with the wood, not going to mess up anything about the rifle. And what I'm going to do is, instead of using those screws to hold tension on this thing, I'm actually going to have kind of a sort of shim material underneath the thing to hold it up. And then we'll use some straps to hold it down. This is kind of ripped off of a product that's out there already. It's called the Bradley cheek rest, and that one actually kind of does both. It's non-destructive and it's adjustable. That thing's pretty slick. I'm going to keep this pretty simple for a couple of reasons. One is I don't want to go out and get all the hardware. If I'm just going to be putting in that, that final adjustable cheek riser here. But the other one is that I'm concerned about the width of the comb. And this is something that people don't really think about too much. It's nice to have the correct height, but if things are still really wide, you find you have to kind of roll your head over in order to see through the scope. And I want to push things a little further this way so that I can get a nice clear view. So that's the plan. Let's get to it. These are the tools and materials that we'll be working with today. We might need to sub in a couple of extras, but we'll find out as things go along. First off, as far as materials go, we want a sheet of Kydex. This is 80 thousandths right here, just regular black. It comes in a few other colors too, but they tend to be more expensive, and I think this black is going to work out really well with our rifle, since we kind of have this big contrasty thing going on. We're also going to need some foam, and this is some pretty dense packing foam right here. You could probably use the sort of stuff that you get off a cooler, or if you want, you could even stack like old mouse pad. You could cut some strips of this and kind of stack them up. But we need a spacer between the stock and the Kydex. Since we're not actually going to be drilling through to hold things in place, the only thing holding that the comb up, holding this piece of plastic up, is going to be some kind of spacer underneath. We're going to need just a couple sheets of paper. I think this is going to be adequate to protect our stock from the heats that we'll be dealing with, but we'll see how that goes. We're going to need some kind of plastic or poster board or something. This is just an old folio, so I'll be cutting some bits off of this to use to make our template. And when it comes to actually cutting the actual material, we're going to need something heavy duty. So this will be good for cutting the folio, and we're going to need probably a heavy-duty knife. I'm going to go ahead and try to do some things with this this kind of hobby X-Acto sort of knife, but I don't think it's really going to do much to this. This is going to be a learning process for me. I've never really messed with Kydex before, so we're going to see how things go. We'll learn together. And for cutting the foam, I'm just going to be using a great big long kitchen knife. A fillet knife would do. Something that's really long so I can make kind of even cuts all the way across this material. I have some Sharpies here so I can mark stuff, but considering I'm working with black, I might need to sub in something like a silver Sharpie. We'll see how that stuff goes. I have some hook and loop material. This is stuff that I picked up from a military surplus store. So I have lots of this, and I'm keeping it very separate because this stuff is a pain to untangle. And I picked up this heat gun from Harbor Freight. This is like $9.78 with a coupon. So I'm not expecting a whole lot out of this, but as long as it can heat up Kydex, I'm going to be happy. And then since we are dealing with some hot plastic, I've got some insulated leather gloves here. That should keep me safe. The first thing I'm going to do is get just a rough chunk of this cut out. And one of the things that you'll need to do to adapt this to your own stock is to determine what kind of angle that this block is going to sit at. If you have an average sort of hunter style stock, your comb is actually going to be down at an angle. It's probably not going to be a Monte Carlo, some kind of, or anything straight like this. So you'll have to cut it a little bit funky to get this nice and parallel with your bore line. In my case, this is parallel with the bore line, so I just need to cut a rectangular chunk off of this. And in this case, you're going to want to make things nice and high. Go ahead and leave lots of material. Now that I have this great big piece of foam, I need to figure out what length it needs to be. And I can't really eyeball this so much. I have to make sure that everything is pretty precise. You can see that I have plenty of clearance here with the bolt. The bolt can come back and it's not going to impact this, but if I want to be able to remove the bolt, that's a different story. So I need to figure out at what point can this bolt actually escape the action. That's right about there. So let's figure out what this distance is. All right, this is coming out to be pretty much an inch. So I need to measure this whole length and take off about an inch. Next, I need to figure out the width that this block of foam needs to be. It's a pretty fat stock right here, and again, you're going to have to adapt this to your own particular rifle, but I'm going to measure this distance, the thickness here, and I'm going to trim this down until it's the same width. I'm coming in at pretty much exactly 1.5 inches. So let's figure out how deep this thing is. Okay, this is a 2-inch block, and this kind of foam is actually pretty expensive. I gotta give a shout out to my neighbor for hooking me up with this stuff. This is some really nice packing foam. So let's make this about 1.5 inches. And that should do right there. Now the next thing I need to do is start to shape this. The underside, as you can see here, is pretty flat, but I'd like to have more surface area, more contact between this block and the comb. So I'm actually going to dish this out a little bit. You could use some kind of curved rasp to do this, but this doesn't have to be really perfect, so I'm just going to go ahead and use this great big knife to cut out just a bit of a dish section. The next order of business is going to be to roll over this shape just a little bit. I'm going to just kind of take the corners off all the way down. So I get a roughly curved shape. I'm not super concerned about making this perfect yet. We're going to be moving this quite a bit. But for now, let's go ahead and come up with the shape of the Kydex that we're going to have on here. I'm going to start by preparing the template material, and this is not the Kydex. This is just a little sheet of plastic that came off that folio. Again, you can use poster board or some kind of cardstock or something, and that might actually work a little bit better, since this is going to be a little difficult to mark on. But this is going to be pretty tough. It's not going to stretch or anything like that. But what I want to do first is get the proper length on this thing. So I'm going to measure off that, I'm going to get a nice straight edge to begin with, and then I'm going to measure off that 5 1/4 or 5 1/8 width that I have going on here. Now that I have this chunk of template material cut out, and this is 5 1/8 inch wide for me, and then 11 1/2 inches tall, and I have this extra high spacer, this is where things start turning from science into art. I need to start figuring out some dimensions on this thing, and this is where I really just need to start feeling things out. So what I've done is I've just taken this piece of material, I've laid it across the top of the spacer, and I'm going to put my face down and take a look through the scope and see how close I'm getting. This is way far off. I am definitely much too high. So I'm going to start trimming this spacer down just a little bit, because remember, the Kydex material is going to be considerably thicker than this. So if I get roughly in the ballpark on a height with this, then the Kydex is going to push things up a little bit more, and it'll just take one last little shave down to get this thing where I want it to be. And once I have this neatly in place, I'm going to start to figure out the shape that this needs to take. So getting this pretty much where it needs to be right there, I'm going to figure out where to start cutting things off. And in this case, since I'm working with black, it's a little bit tough for me. I'm going to have to kind of mark this with a Sharpie, or not a Sharpie, but an X-Acto knife, and I'm going to cut this angle right here. Because what I want is to be able to have these kind of hanging sections of Kydex, and then we're going to pull them together using some Velcro straps. And this might be a good point to actually just kind of attach this temporarily with some tape so that you can keep things neatly in place and not worry about anything sliding around. And what I'm doing is I'm working with the shape of the stock. There's actually a pretty pronounced little flat area right here, and I'm going to have the Kydex end just before that. And same thing on the other side. And all I have to do is just draw a line between these points, cut that off, and that should give me the rough shape of what this should look like. And here's our faux comb with that template material in place, and this is the time to check things out, make sure everything is looking okay. And it looks like it is for me. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to kind of round off these corners and make this just a little bit prettier and less likely to snag on things. Now it's time to transfer this template onto the actual Kydex, and I want to pick a side. Generally there's going to be a slick side and a little bit of a rougher side, and I'm choosing the rougher side. I think this just feels a little bit better on my face. I'm going to go with this. And instead of tracing this out using a pen or something, I'm just going to take a little spray paint and I'm going to give it a shot all the way around the edges here, and that should give me a nice clean template to cut out. That turned out pretty well. I did get a little smearing when I moved the template a little too fast and the stuff wasn't quite dry, but I can still see the edge. So this should work just fine, and I really wish that I had a bandsaw or a scroll saw. That would make this cut super, super easy. And again, I've never cut Kydex before, so I'm really winging it here. I've been looking up some, tutorials and what people have been saying about how to cut this stuff, and supposedly one of the best ways is to just score it with a utility knife like this, and then bend it and break it, and you get a pretty clean edge that way. And that definitely won't work for these curves. This is not really the tool for that kind of thing. So I think I'll try some tin snips for that, and we'll see how this goes. All right, that's a pretty deep score right there. Sure feels like it. I have some pretty good scores there, but I'm gonna just dig them a little bit deeper. Never mind, guys. Turned out this stuff wasn't too bad to just cut straight through. I mean, yeah, it did take quite a few passes, but I don't know. I just like the idea of cutting it better than breaking it. All right, there we go. There's our rough shape. And now it's time to see if the tin snips are going to do their job on these corners. Okay, this has a tendency to catch and then suddenly cut. So I'm not going to try to get really close to that edge. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a rough cut, and I'm going to go over this with sandpaper to get the nice smooth edge that I want. I'm starting out with some 80 grit, and I just have it wrapped around a bit of a chunk of 2x4. One of the things that my father-in-law taught me when doing any kind of stock shaping or anything like that is you want to have some kind of firm thing behind your sandpaper. You don't really use it by itself. But 80 grit should get through this pretty quick. Here is the roughly shaped piece. Everything's nice and rounded, but it is rough. So I'm going to go over this with some, I think this is 320 grit, and again it's on a block. But in addition to going over the edges this way, I'm going to be doing a bit of a chamfer around the edges here to take off some of those little, some of these little edges are proud and they're rough, and so I'm just going to smooth all this over. This feels really nice. Good smooth edges, nothing to snag on. This feels great. Now for the next big question mark, how to get this thing heated up and shaped around the top of that comb the way that I want. We're gonna give it a shot, see how it goes. Here's where things get weird, y'all. You might notice that this is not the stock that we were just messing with. This is the original Axis stock. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create the shape for the top of this using this stock instead of the Boyds, because the Boyds it's a little bit fat. This one is nice and thin, and this is the sort of thing that I think I'm going to want for the top of that comb. I'm going to want to kind of roll it over and push it a little further away. A properly designed stock is not really that kind of ambidextrous stock that you see everywhere, or like even you get on the Boyds. It's going to kind of push off to one side a little bit. It's going to have a little bit of cast off in the face. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make things a little bit thin, and then, so this will be my original mandrel, and then we're going to use the Axis one to kind of finish things off and get the dimensions right. So what I'm going to do to protect this stock and the other stock as well is I'm just going to tape down a piece of paper, and then we're going to heat that stuff up, and it should just fold right over. We'll see how this goes. Naturally, you don't have to take this step right here. This is just something that I'm doing for me because I'm kind of a snob about stocks now. Ever since I made one that fits me perfectly, I get kind of frustrated when I'm behind a stock that doesn't fit quite right. So this is just one little extra step that I'm taking. Just use your own stock if you want. It's going to work out just fine, I'm sure. So what I've done is I've marked the center points on here, and this is where I'm going to concentrate my heat. I don't want these sections out here to be getting warm. I just want to be heating up that middle and have it kind of flex over the top. I want to keep those sides nice and straight. All right, here we go. Wish me luck. I'm assuming that once this is quite warm, gravity will simply pull it down. And you can see that it's really starting to bend. Hey, that was pretty easy. Here's the result. It's a nice, neat bend. And you can see that it doesn't fit the host stock right here yet. It kind of came off at an angle because of the way that axis is shaped. And this is exactly what I wanted. Again, this is a step that you guys don't need to take if you're just going to be fitting directly to whatever stock you have. If you just want to take that curve and then make it higher. In my case, I did want to kind of roll this off and push it away from my face a little further that way, which is why I went with that thinner one. And I'm going to have to put a second bend right here in order to make this happen. So I've marked off this area right here. This is where I'm going to have to apply the heat and create a second bend. This is going to be a little bit tricky, and I hope I can pull this one off. Everything's gone well so far. We'll see how this goes. And even if this does mess up a little bit, this stuff is very flexible. I can just heat it up again and reshape it. So here's how I'm going to do it. I put a couple of sheets of plywood in here, and I'm going to use that kind of like an anvil. When this thing gets warm, I'm just going to push these things up in there and then fold this down, and that should get a couple of nice parallel surfaces. That's roughly the thickness of the stock. I got the shape that I wanted for the most part, but you can see that there is a bit of a dip right there before the crease. It does dip in a little bit. Even though that's there, I think that this is still going to be better overall than just going with the stock shape. I want that little bit of cast off. Let's take a look at the total shape. You can see that it's not just rounded like we would have gotten on the top of this. Those sides are still nice and parallel though, and it kind of grabs on a little bit to the stock. I went back and got out a little bit of the dip. That should feel a little bit better. Next we need to cut some slats right here for the straps to go through. I forgot to mention we'll be using one more tool. We're going to be using a Dremel with a cutoff wheel. I'm going to use that to just cut out some slits here. And the position on this stock is going to be a little bit weird. It's going to change depending on what size and shape stock you have. But since I have this little hook thing going on, I'm going to use that to help tension everything into place and to keep things from moving around. So I'm going to put a slit right here for one of the straps. And then I'm going to put one a little further back over here. And then there's going to be a strap that goes around the back, around the butt pad. So I'll put that a little bit low down, but I'm going to try not to interfere too much with one that I'll have right here. If I had really been thinking, I would have already cut these slats before I shaped this. You guys have the benefit of hindsight though, so go ahead and cut these before you shape this out, and that should be a little bit easier on you. The slits are cut, so the last part that we need is just going to be those 3 straps. And I'm using that military surplus hook and loop. You don't have to buy this stuff. You could go to Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot, and you could get the Velcro that comes in a spool. It just looks like a big wound up spool of tape, and you can use that to make these straps. So you just need to figure out how long it needs to be to go around to the other side. Okay, this one goes around the back, and then we have 2 going around the bottom. Just figure out how long those are, cut them off, and in my case, I need to sew mine up since I need to have those hook ends on the ends of kind of the loop tapes, and we'll see what that looks like. I have the completed straps in place, and this one I perceive to be the most important. So this is the one that I installed first. This is the one that I really tightened down. This one is going to very easily prevent things from moving under recoil in one direction, but this is really the only strap that's keeping things from moving the other direction. You can see that I really snugged it up right up against that little hook section right here. So yeah, this one is very tight. And then I installed this one second and this one third. So I'm making sure that it's in the proper position for my face and so that I can remove that bolt if I need to. So next I'm going to figure out what the exact height of this is going to be. And for this, I'm going to take this thing off the bench and I'm going to actually get in my firing position. This is a prone rifle. I'm really not going to be shooting it in any other position. So I'm just going to get down in the prone and I'm going to start to figure out what height I need to reduce this to, and little by little start to remove that spacer material. I have removed about 2 millimeters of foam from the top of that, and I've kind of reshaped things a little bit, and it is feeling extremely comfortable. And all the dimensions just seem to be in the right spot. If I close my eyes, get comfy behind the rifle, open them up, I am looking straight through the scope, and that's exactly what I wanted. So now it's time to test this in a real-world scenario, and thankfully in 3 days we have that 1,000-yard F-class match that we've been waiting for all this time. We're going to be able to test out this new scope at even longer range. It worked out really well in that last 600-yard match, and we have a review on that scope over here on the side. We're going to be fixing up the ammo. I've already taken care of that. In the last 600-yard match, we had some sticky bolt issues because of a slight load variation. So we're using all the same brass now, and the load should be exactly the same. I anticipate good things there. And of course, the comfort level is going to be much higher this time around. So yeah, be sure to subscribe down here in the corner to make sure that you don't miss out on the next video, because this one is going to be really the culmination of the whole project. And one last thing before I leave this alone, I need a little paint thinner. I'm going to clean up some of the mess that I made on here. I made some markings with a paint pen, and I got a little bit of paint overspray with my template. So I'm just going to clean this up and just take a look at the total effect. It's quite nice. You have this just this blonde, unstained laminate versus all of this black. And it's a really stark contrast, really interesting looking rifle. I do like how it came out as far as the aesthetics go. I wasn't really thinking about that at first when I was planning this project. I didn't really care too much about how it looked. But I don't know, I guess it's the perfectionist in me. I wanted to make something that was kind of pretty. I'm really happy with this. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe. Even if you didn't like this particular content, go ahead and subscribe. There's probably something coming that's more up your alley. Check out this playlist right here. This is going to have videos in a similar vein to what you just watched. These 2 videos we cherry-picked for you. And finally, the Social Regressive is on Patreon. So you can become a patron of the destructive arts and earn some goodies while helping us to provide high-quality videos just by kicking us a few bucks a month. Thanks a bunch for your patronage.